$500 million. You have it. Nobody knows. Not your neighbor, not your coworker, not even your family. You walk through the grocery store parking lot, your net worth tucked behind a blank stare and a 10-year-old Honda. The cashier makes $12 an hour. She smiles at you the same way she smiles at everyone else. You are invisible. That is the goal. Most people with money cannot help themselves. They need the recognition, the watch, the car, the house that screams, "Look at what I have." You do not. You understand something they never will. Wealth is not a performance, it is a position. And the moment you reveal your position, you lose the only advantage that actually matters: control. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, but he also understood something more precise. It is better to be underestimated than either, because underestimation gives you room to move, to act, to decide without interference. Most millionaires are trapped by their own visibility. You are not. By the end of this, you will know exactly how to live with $500 million and maintain total invisibility, without sacrificing freedom, without losing control. But here's the part nobody tells you. Money does not solve problems. It amplifies whatever you already are. If you are insecure, money makes you desperate to prove yourself. If you are disciplined, money gives you the power to disappear. Most people think wealth is the end game. It is not. Wealth is the beginning of a much harder game, the game of concealment, the game of strategic invisibility. Every financial guru tells you to build wealth so you can enjoy it. They are wrong. Enjoyment is not the goal. Autonomy is. And autonomy only works if no one knows you have it. Machiavelli warned about this 500 years ago. He said the greatest danger to a prince is not his enemies, it is the envy of those around him. The moment people know you have something, they want it, they resent it, they justify taking it. You become a target. The IRS, lawsuits, family members you haven't spoken to in a decade suddenly showing up with business ideas, strangers pitching investment opportunities. Everyone wants access. Everyone wants a piece. Visibility is not success. It is exposure. And exposure is risk. Income is not power. Control is. I learned this by watching someone fail at it. A mentor of mine made $30 million in his 40s. Within 2 years, everyone knew. He bought the house, the cars, he posted about his wins. He thought he had made it. What he actually did was paint a target on his back. 3 lawsuits, 2 divorces, an audit that lasted 18 months. By the time it was over, he had spent $4 million defending himself, not because he did anything wrong, because people knew he had money. Machiavelli started making sense to me then, not as philosophy, but as survival. And if this makes you uncomfortable, that is a good sign. John D. Rockefeller became the richest man in modern history. At his peak, his wealth was equivalent to over $400 billion in today's dollars. But here's what most people do not know. Rockefeller dressed like a clerk. He lived modestly. He walked to work. When journalists asked him about his fortune, he deflected. He gave vague answers. He understood that his real power was not in showing wealth, it was in controlling the flow of information about it. He could move without being watched. He could invest without being questioned. He could make decisions that would take years to unfold, and by the time people realized what he had done, it was already complete. That is not luck. That is strategy. Strategy 1. You drive a car worth less than 3% of your liquid net worth. Let's be precise. $500 million, 3% of that is $15 million. You're not driving a $15 million car. You're driving something boring. A Honda Accord, a Toyota Camry, maybe a Lexus if you want to feel slightly elevated. But even then, used, not new. The mechanism is simple. Cars are signals. Everyone reads them. A Ferrari says, "I need you to know I have money." A 10-year-old sedan says, "I'm not worth paying attention to." That's exactly what you want. Think of it like camouflage in a predator-filled environment. The flashy prey gets eaten first. The boring one survives. When you show up to a business meeting in a car that costs $60,000, people assume you are comfortable but not liquid. They don't calculate how much cash you have sitting in index funds. They assume you are like them, slightly above median income, managing, stable, but not untouchable. And that assumption protects you. The outcome is this: you move freely. No one tries to sell you overpriced garbage. No one pitches you their startup. No one assumes you can solve their financial problems. You are boring, forgettable, invisible. Don't buy the car that makes you feel rich. Buy the car that makes you disappear. Now, let's talk about where you live. Strategy 2. You live in a neighborhood that's nice but not notable. Not the best zip code, not the penthouse, not the gated estate with the circular driveway. You live in a comfortable middle to upper middle class area. 3-bedroom, maybe 4. Well-maintained but not renovated to the level of a magazine spread. The goal is not to impress. The goal is to blend. Here's the mechanism. Neighborhoods are ecosystems of comparison. If you live in the most expensive house on the block, you become the reference point. People notice you. They talk about you. They wonder what you do for a living. You become the subject of speculation. That's the opposite of what you want. Instead, you live in the middle. Not the cheapest house, not the most expensive, the one that doesn't stand out. When your neighbors talk, your name doesn't come up. You're part of the landscape, not the focal point. Think of silence as armor. The less people wonder about you, the safer you are. The outcome is simple. You are not a topic of conversation. You are not envied. You are not resented. You exist in a space where no one assigns value to your presence because they assume your presence is unremarkable. That's the entire point. Move to the next strategy. Strategy 3. You never talk about money. Ever. Not with friends, not with family, not with coworkers, not even in vague terms. You don't say, "I'm doing well," or "I made a good investment," or "I'm comfortable." You say nothing. Silence is the default. Here's why. The moment you acknowledge wealth, even indirectly, you create a data point. People file it away. They start to build a picture. Oh, he said he's comfortable. He drives a decent car. His house is paid off. He must have a few million. That picture grows. It becomes a narrative, and narratives are dangerous because once someone believes you have money, they start behaving differently. They ask for loans. They expect you to pay for things. They assume you can afford to help. You become a resource instead of a person. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote that the prince must always control what others believe about him, not by lying, by withholding. The less you say, the less they know. The less they know, the less they expect. Think of every conversation about money as a potential leak. Once the information is out, you cannot take it back. The outcome is this: you become financially invisible. People assume you are doing fine, but they don't assume you are wealthy. That gap is everything. It's the space where you operate freely. Keep your mouth shut, always. Strategy 4. You work, or at least you appear to. Even with $500 million, you maintain the appearance of employment. You have a job title. You go somewhere during the day. You talk about projects, deadlines, meetings. You do not have to actually work in the traditional sense. You could run a small consulting firm, manage a few investments, volunteer on a board. The specifics do not matter. What matters is that when someone asks what you do, you have an answer that sounds normal. Here's the mechanism. Employment is a social anchor. It explains your time. It explains your routine. It explains why you are not on a yacht in the Mediterranean. When people know you work, they stop asking questions. They assume your lifestyle is funded by your salary, not by your portfolio. That assumption is your shield. The moment you say, "I do not work," you open a door. People start wondering how you pay for things, how you fill your time, what you are really worth. You do not want them wondering, you want them assuming, and the safest assumption is that you work like everyone else. The outcome is simple. You have a cover, a reason to wake up, a reason to leave the house, a reason to interact with the world in a way that looks completely ordinary. You are hiding in plain sight, and plain sight is the safest place to hide. Let us talk about your circle now. Strategy 5. You cut off anyone who asks you for money immediately. No second chances, no explanations. The first time someone asks, you are done with them. This sounds harsh. It is. But it is also necessary. Here's why. Asking for money is a test. It's someone checking whether you will say yes. If you say yes once, they will ask again, and they will tell other people that you helped them, and those people will ask too. You become known as someone who gives. That reputation spreads faster than anything else. Within a year, you are surrounded by people who see you as an ATM, not a friend, not family, a source of funds. Machiavelli wrote that generosity is a trap because the more you give, the more people expect, and the moment you stop, they resent you. You cannot win by giving, you can only lose slower. So you do not give, you do not lend, you do not invest in someone else's idea. You cut them off, politely if you want, but permanently. Think of every ask as a red flag. It means that person has categorized you as wealthy. That categorization is dangerous. The outcome is brutal but effective. You lose some people. Good. Those people were never interested in you. They were interested in your money. What you keep is a circle of people who never asked, people who respected boundaries, people who do not see you as a wallet. That is the only circle worth having. Now let us go deeper. Strategy 6. You never co-sign, never guarantee, never personally back anyone else's financial decision. Not for your brother, not for your best friend, not for your own child. This is not about love. This is about structure. Here's the mechanism. The moment you co-sign a loan or guarantee a debt, you are legally tied to someone else's ability to repay. You have given up control. You are now exposed to their decisions, their discipline, their life circumstances. You have made yourself vulnerable. That is unacceptable. Most people co-sign because they feel obligated, because they think it's a small favor. It is not a small favor. It is a transfer of risk. You are taking on someone else's downside with zero upside. If they pay it back, you get nothing. If they don't, you lose money and relationships. Think of co-signing as opening your vault and handing someone else the key. You would never do that, so do not do the financial equivalent. The outcome is simple. You protect your capital, you protect your legal standing, and you protect yourself from resentment. Because when someone defaults and you have to pay, the relationship is over anyway. Better to say no up front than to say yes and lose everything later. Say no, always. Let us talk about spending now. Strategy 7. You spend money on things that don't show, not things that do. You invest in health, privacy, time, education, security. You do not invest in status. Here's why. Visible spending is a signal. A watch that costs $50,000 tells everyone who sees it that you have $50,000 to waste on a watch. That is not a flex. That is a leak. Every visible purchase is a piece of evidence, evidence that you have money, evidence that you spend it, evidence that you value appearance. You do not want to give anyone that evidence. Instead, you spend on things that improve your life, but don't broadcast it. A personal trainer, but not a celebrity one. A financial advisor, but not one who posts about their clients. A home security system, but not one you talk about. The best money you spend is money no one knows you spent. Think of wealth like electricity. It works best when it flows quietly through the infrastructure. The moment it sparks and makes noise, something is wrong. The outcome is this. Your quality of life improves dramatically, but your external appearance stays flat. You live better than most people, but no one can tell. That gap is your advantage. Spend invisibly, always. Now let us talk about what you say when people ask directly. Strategy 8. When someone asks how much you make or how much you're worth, you deflect with precision. You do not lie, you do not tell the truth, you redirect. Here's how. If someone asks what you do for a living, you give a vague answer that sounds specific. I work in consulting. I manage some investments. I do project work. All technically true, none of them revealing. If someone asks how business is going, you say it's steady. Not great, not terrible, steady. If someone asks if you're rich, you laugh and say, I wish. Then you change the subject immediately. The mechanism here is conversational control. You are not refusing to answer. You are answering in a way that satisfies social norms without giving real information. You are closing the loop without opening a door. Most people will not push. They will accept your deflection and move on. The few who keep asking are telling you something important. They are trying to extract information. That means they are already suspicious. That means they are already a risk. The outcome is this. You maintain relationships without exposing your position. You stay friendly, you stay normal, you stay invisible. Practice your deflections until they sound natural, because the question will come, and your answer will determine whether you stay hidden or become a target. Let us go even deeper. Strategy 9. You never let anyone see your accounts. Not your spouse, unless you absolutely trust them. Not your kids, not your financial advisor, unless they are bound by legal confidentiality, and you have verified it. Your accounts are classified information. Here's the mechanism. Once someone sees a number, they can't unsee it. That number becomes their reference point for every interaction with you. If your child sees that you have $500 million, they will never look at a summer job the same way. They will never feel urgency. They will never build discipline. They will know that no matter what happens, they are backed by a fortune. That knowledge kills motivation. It kills resourcefulness. It kills the edge that actually builds competence. If a friend sees your balance, they will start calculating, maybe not consciously, but they will wonder why you're not picking up the check, why you're not helping them out, why you are not funding their idea. Visibility creates expectation. Expectation creates resentment. Think of your account balance as a classified military position. The moment the enemy knows where you are, you lose the advantage. Keep it hidden, always. The outcome is total operational security. No one knows your position. No one can calculate your moves. No one can predict your capacity. You operate in the dark. That is exactly where you want to be. Now the final strategy.
Strategy 10. You build systems that outlast you. Trusts, LLCs, offshore structures if legal and appropriate. Estate plans that protect your wealth from visibility even after you are gone. You do not just hide your wealth in life, you hide it in legacy. Here's why. The moment you die, your wealth becomes public if you have not structured it correctly. Probate is public record. If your estate goes through probate, anyone can look up what you owned. Journalists, distant relatives, opportunists, everyone. That defeats the entire point. You spent decades staying invisible. You do not let death undo that. Instead, you set up revocable living trusts. You transfer assets into entities that do not bear your name. You work with an estate attorney who understands privacy, not just taxes. You make sure that when you are gone, your wealth transfers silently. No headlines, no public filings, no fights. The mechanism is structural invisibility. You are not hiding money illegally. You are using legal tools to ensure privacy. Tools that wealthy families have used for generations. Rockefeller did it. Vanderbilt did it. Every major family fortune that survived multiple generations did it. Not because they were shady, because they were smart. Think of this as building a vault that stays locked even after you are not there to guard it. The outcome is multi-generational invisibility. Your children inherit wealth without the burden of public scrutiny. They are protected, your legacy is protected, and the strategy continues. Because wealth is not a moment, it's a structure. Build the structure now. You started this video in a grocery store parking lot. $500 million. Nobody knew. You walked past people who would never guess, who would never suspect, who would treat you exactly the same whether you had $50 or $500 million. That was the point. That is still the point. Most people think wealth is about what you can buy. It's not. It's about what you can avoid. You can avoid attention, obligation, expectation, risk. You can avoid becoming a target, becoming a transaction, becoming someone that people calculate instead of connect with. Machiavelli understood that the most powerful position is the one nobody sees. The prince who governs quietly governs longest. The man who holds wealth silently holds it safest. You are not rich because people know you are rich. You are rich because nobody knows at all. That's the difference. That's the game. And most people lose it in the first year. They can't help themselves. They need the validation, the recognition, the proof that they made it. You do not. You already made it. Now you're playing a different game. The game of disappearing while everything around you grows. Most people will hear this and do nothing. They will think it sounds paranoid, extreme, unnecessary. They will keep posting their wins, buying the things that signal status, telling people about their success, and they'll pay for it. In lawsuits, in ruined relationships, in constant requests, in audits, in resentment. A few will act. A few will understand that silence is not weakness, it's strategy. A few will realize that the wealthiest people you have never heard of stayed that way on purpose. Decide which one you are. Because $500 million is not the finish line, it's the beginning of a life where every move you make is either protection or exposure. And exposure is the only thing you cannot buy your way out of. If this shifted the way you see things, do not stop here. What you heard is only the surface. The deeper strategies, the legal structures, the psychological frameworks that allow you to live this way without losing your mind, that's what separates the ones who stay invisible from the ones who crack under the pressure of secrecy. Subscribe. No fluff, no noise, just strategy. Most people will watch this and move on. A few will stay and change. Decide which one you are.